Hey, welcome to Shop Talk with Brandi and James.
We talk about all things related to mental health and cross-cultural workers.
Thanks for joining us, and welcome to Season 3.
Here we go.
What are we talking about today, James?
Emotional intelligence, or potentially the lack thereof, depends on your perspective.
Right? Why do you think it's important to talk about emotional intelligence?
Lots of different organizations, lots of different cultures of organizations. It's one of my favorite things to try to guess what the Myers-Briggs is of the typology of an actual organization, not just
my gosh,
individuals.
yes. Yes.
And our organization happens to be mainly ISTJs. And
absolutely. Mm-hmm. Sure.
Neither of us happen to be that.
I don't think so.
For certain.
I think we're the outliers for
yes.
our organization.
Absolutely.
Keeps things spicy. So.
But I'm also just noticing most of the clients I work with, there's a significant component of learning and growing and understanding of oneself, which is a key component of emotional intelligence. Daniel Goleman, who wrote the book entitled Emotional Intelligence, defines it as referring to a feeling and its distinctive thoughts, psychological and biological stage. So it's this big range of knowing ourselves. And in a lot of my counseling sessions, we're really focusing on growing, particularly in that part of who we are. I met with somebody who's on an incredible grief journey, and we're doing a deep dive into understanding how her body's responding to the intensity of loss and grief and all of those emotions that go with it, regret and grief and guilt and on and on and on.
Someone else
has just kind of recognized that he doesn't have a great range of emotion other than anger. That's how he was coming across. So we're kind of doing this deep dive into what's underneath that anger. And it easily all connects back to emotional intelligence.
So a lot of emotional intelligence is understanding your own self, what's going on internally and how that affects just who you are.
Exactly. Goleman says, by teaching people to tune into their emotions with intelligence and expand their circles of caring, we can transform organizations from the inside out, making a positive difference in our world. I think there's a huge component about organizational health that really starts within an individual. Even empathy. To be able to empathize with somebody, you have to have that emotional experience within yourself. So if you're living in a very narrow emotional range, a lot of people I work with, we've got 8 emotion words, hungry, angry, sad, stressed, lonely. I was meeting with a guy who had a ton of losses in the last year and a half, and he just kept saying sad. So I had to make him rank sad 0 to 10 because, we're sad about Chick-fil-A being closed on a Sunday, but then we're also sad about the death of a father. So we got to have more range than just the word sad, or at least rank it.
Right. It helps you understand too the significance of the things play in your life. Yes, you can be, sad about Chick-fil-A. Who isn't sad about it being closed on Sunday?
Only time I want to eat it.
But that doesn't mean it holds the same space and the same weight in your life as being sad about the passing of someone dear to you. So when you can use that same word, but you have to understand the different weight that it has on you.
And a lot of it starts with really just understanding ourselves. Pete Scazzaro, who wrote the book Emotionally Healthy Spirituality, says, to feel is to be human. To minimize or deny what we feel is a distortion of what it means to be image bearers of God. To the degree we are unable to express our emotions, we remain impaired in our ability to love God, ourselves, and others. Back to how do we connect with somebody if we can't even connect within ourselves?
And you brought up such a good point about connecting with others, connecting with God. The emotions that we have, that we experience, are part of our created beings, part of how God has created us.
Cross-cultural workers tend to be pretty highly driven. It takes a lot of work and effort and commitment to leave everything in your home country to go get a job and work in another country and navigate cross cultures. I just don't think we put a lot of energy turned towards ourselves. It feels selfish. And I think we're just we don't have time for that. I need to focus all my energy externally. But I even think about my dad's a firefighter, and there's this kind of masculinity that we're tough and we do hard things and brave and courageous, but not actually attending to those other emotions like being afraid or being nervous or disappointed, shame, Brene Brown talks a lot about shame and the power of vulnerability. I think when we don't attend to that, we're really missing out a significant part of how to relate to each other in a healthy way.
What happens when people are not connected to their emotions and when they do try to stuff them, or they're just not aware of them?
I think there's a loss to human connection because, you know, our emotionality is a significant part of how we relate to one another. So when you are not connected with your emotions, you will find that there are ways you cannot connect to the people around you. And we probably all know people who seem a little numb and distant and disengaged, and that's what that's like.
Right.
And it also impacts our ability to relate to God.
Yes, your world becomes just smaller. Your ability to function emotionally just becomes quite a bit smaller, and your ability to relate to other people in that way. What a beautiful gift it is whenever you are able to connect with your emotions. In the difficulty of that, of the more difficult emotions, about what a beautiful gift it is to be able to sit with other people in that and to share that the wide range of what we're meant to feel with other people too. I mean, I feel like that's communion.
Yeah.
Right there.
It's a gift.
Do you think there are certain emotions that people tend to shy away from?
If we think there's not good and bad emotions, there's good ones and more difficult ones. I think in general, we tend to shy away from the difficult ones.
Yeah, we do. Yeah.
I have one of those worksheets that has lots of emotion words and kind of ranked in different levels. And often in counseling, I'll have that available and hand it to people. We've just got to improve our vocabulary, which helps us actually understanding the complexity of what we're experiencing.
What happens when someone is able to look at all their emotions and name them and accept them?
But I think it helps them understand themselves, and in areas where they need to attend to, let's say anxiety, depression, things that, yes, that is an emotion, it is not bad, but it's also not healthy to just stay there. Understanding is kind of the first step in beginning to move towards healthier places of emotionality. I tend to do a lot of work with obsessive compulsive disorder, which is a form of anxiety. And one of the first things is just recognizing what it is reduces some of the intensity of it.
Well, I've recognized too, whenever I've talked with people, that the not attending to particular emotions takes a lot of work, and it takes almost as much work to push it aside than it does to sit with it and recognize it.
Yeah, it's so much work to stuff it down, to put on this kind of fake mask, if you will, masking the genuine stuff, the deeper stuff. That's exhausting.
Right.
I worked with a guy who had extreme trauma as a teen that had never been dealt with. And because of that, he never allowed himself to feel sad, because he was genuinely afraid that if he were to allow himself to feel sad, his whole life would unravel. It was such a scary thing. And we did EMDR, which is a particular type of therapy for trauma. And he wasn't able to empathize with his 3 daughters and his wife when they felt sad, because he was so shut off from it. He just stuffed it down, hid it, buried it. I was aware that his coworkers found him distant and removed and disengaged, because he just didn't have an entire range of emotions that he even allowed himself to experience. And through counseling, he actually began to sit in that sadness, and through the EMDR therapy began to process it. And it was really scary for him, but he did it. And he began to allow himself to express that sadness and that sorrow and the grief and the loss. First time it clicked in terms of being empathetic with his daughters. And he's like, in the first time in my life, or in her life, and in my relationship with my daughter, I was able to just be sad with her and hold her and be empathetic and be like, I'm so sad. That's so tough to feel upset.
That's really precious.
Yeah, he had to allow himself to really experience the depth of that whole range of sorrow, and it allowed him to actually be empathetic. And all of a sudden he could be vulnerable and connect with his daughter when she was sad.
What a gift that is too.
When we think about emotional intelligence, there's kind of 4 different categories. So one of them is about ourself. So our self-awareness and self-management. So knowing what I feel and being able to manage that, emotional self-control. And then there's the external part, the social competence. That's a part of emotional intelligence. So social awareness, which is like empathy, being able to understand and read what other people are experiencing. And then relationship manage. How do we use that in terms of navigating relationship with other people? But that first part is really about self-awareness. And if you are familiar with like the Johari window, there is the part of us that we know that we don't share, the part of us that others know and they don't tell us, and the part of us that we know that we and they know. And then there's that last circle that's kind of the hidden. We don't know it and other people don't know it. And a lot of our life is about trying to grow in those areas. Sometimes we need somebody to give us input.
You feel like people need to be able to grow in their own awareness of themselves before they're able to start to begin understanding, their coworkers and their family and people around them.
And it helps us be able to manage our emotions in a healthy way. If we're not aware of them, then we may not know how we're coming across to other people.
Right.
Which is going to impact our ability to navigate relationships. And a lot of times, because when we're not connected with our emotions in the self-awareness way, it's like having a mask on that we mentioned. The mask might be defensiveness or anger or just pretending everything's fine. Ignorance is bliss. I just not going to go there. I'm not going to worry about it.
It's fine. It's fine. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The happy face. Oh, everything's okay. I'm fine. Don't worry about me. Everything's fine. Or people pleasing can be a mask. I'm a middle child and a counselor. What's more people pleasing than that? So, for me, I think defensiveness is huge in organizations, because Pete Scazzaro said one of the most destructive temptations leaders face is living and leading from the veneer of the false self. And when we're in that place, we tend as a first response to get defensive for stuff.
Well, it's hard to sit with other people's perspectives of you that aren't really flattering, that they're not, or other people's experiences of you. And it's really, it's a lot of hard work to be able to sit with that and accept it and look at the truth in that. Even if if you feel like someone's off their rocker or whatever, and their experience of you, there's probably some truth to what they're bringing to you. And it's worth it to sit with it.
Right. I mean, it's really hard to know if our self-awareness is accurate without input from other people.
Right.
I think I'm really funny, but I actually need to know from other people if that's true or not. I could be way off.
Mm-hmm. You generally are. Yeah.
I think this defensiveness thing is really connected to shame.
Yes.
Right. So, the negative side of, instead of I made a mistake, it's I'm unintelligent, and that makes me feel like an idiot and I'm not going to be accepted. And it just goes to this deeper stuff. So we get defensive.
You feel like shame is one of the more powerful motivators that we experience?
I mean, must be. It's also back to Brene Brown. That's what she's built all of her books on, is how powerful and really damaging shame is. It's the self-condemnation that leads us to be our worst selves out of it.
Right.
So because I was preparing this, when we had our team meeting, I had kind of an intentional focus. I was like, hey, I want to be less defensive about some things. And there was a few things that would come up because I was asking for how I was as a leader and was getting feedback on some things that were totally true. I am terrible at following up on reimbursement requests. Really anything related to numbers, I get a little brain fog and just don't want to do it. But I was living in that. I was like, I need to practice this and, just be like, you're right. I'm not good at this and I'm going to try to do better. Whereas I think my natural tendency would be to be more defensive and be like, this is all the reasons I get so many emails. Actually, I just need to work on it.
Well, what was that like for you to be intentional about sitting with that?
Really good and really hard.
Right.
Now, I don't find a lot of my identity in leading. So I'm sure it would be harder if it was in an area in which I had more of my identity shaped. But still, I see so often in organizational cultures and in teams, individuals and definitely leaders who are just like, their first response is defensive to almost anything.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. We have such a strong reflex to self-protect.
That's it.
Yeah.
And there could be a trauma component, like people that have had difficult experiences with people. We do tend to armor up and hunker down and protect ourselves.
Right. Because we remember what it was like before when someone
Yeah.
attacked us or, didn't respect whatever boundaries we had or whatever. So you're helping people develop, you're helping clients or colleagues, whatever, develop understanding of emotional intelligence. Like, where do you start?
With the part of self-awareness, I think the growth is learning to pay attention to the interior and silence and solitude. Like we gotta, even as an extrovert, I need to zip it and just kind of turn inward and notice what's going on inside of myself. Find trusted companions, people that you trust that you can actually ask for input. Hey, you were in that meeting. Did I come across too hard?
I come across too hard.
Yeah. Move out of your comfort zone. We often just kind of stay in our comfort space. Like, I'm great with my 8 emotions, the words I know. Part of becoming more aware of ourselves is intentionality and moving outside of that. Gabor Mate said, so when we stop the civil war inside the body, it contributes to better physical health.
I love that. That's really good. It's all connected, right? Like how if we're stepping our emotions, not paying attention to them, it doesn't happen in isolation. It's going to affect how we're doing physically.
There's a ton of science that points to the connection between our emotions and our bodies.
Right. Right. What should people expect? Like, say, someone who has really lived a lot of their lives with a narrow range of emotions that they're willing to interact with. What do you think they should expect when they're starting to pay more attention to their emotions?
Discomfort.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's even the more positive ones. I always have to tell Ellie, this is my surprised face. I picture Tracy the same way, like ecstatic.
It's pretty much the same. You're really expressive.
I know. I've got a not compared to Ellie.
Oh, gotcha. Oh, she is. She is very expressive. It's an endearing thing about her. Yeah.
I've got some friends who have a son. He's like, 11 or 12, and it is fairly neutral all the time.
Mm-hmm.
They took him skiing for the first time, and they keep like, are you having fun? Like, what do you like? They're getting nothing back. And at the end of the day, he's like, Dad, skiing is the best thing I've ever done. I hope I can do this more.
Really?
So funny.
Oh, that's great.
In the words of Ted Lasso, great TV show, highly recommend it.
Mm-hmm.
We need to be curious.
Yes. And just curious without judgment. Just sit with your emotions and see what comes up. It's there for a reason.
Yeah. What is that? Why is that? How is that? Why did I do that?
Yeah. So you said that sometimes, like, when people start to sit with their emotions more, they can expect to feel discomfort. And how would you recommend people sort of process through that and work through that?
Yeah, recognition and management is pretty big.
Yeah, I was going to ask what you meant by management, but go ahead with the Eugene Peterson too.
Yeah, Eugene Peterson said, "Kingdom of self is heavily defended territory."
That's right.
And beginning to engage in ourself is the managing. So we've started to recognize it. We're growing in our vocabulary and understanding. The second thing is, what do we then do with these emotions? How do we know when we are engaging in our emotions in a healthy way or managing them? They're neither good nor bad, but they most often need attended to, particularly the ones that are more difficult.
Along with that, is there also some value in understanding the intensity of your emotions? So that, like you were talking about earlier, feeling sad, you can feel sad about one particular thing and sad about another particular thing, but it's the intensity and the impact on your life are very different. So I'm just wondering about the importance of that too, of being able to sort of say, okay, I feel anxious right now. Okay, where would you work with helping people sort of rank that on a scale of 1 to 10 or something like that?
Sure. There's a lot of people that I meet with as adults Normally, let's say even in their 30s and 40s, and they discover for the first time that they have major anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
They knew they were stressed about stuff, but they hadn't framed it as, oh, that stress and that tension in my head and my shoulders and my upset stomach that I've had for 10 years is actually because I'm really anxious about all of these unknowns in my life.
Yeah. Now, I had a similar experience. I didn't realize until adulthood that I'm quite an anxious person, which doesn't mean like that's always going to be like how I identify myself, but being able to recognize that is something that's kind of prominent in my life has helped me to, again, recognize it more, recognize its impact, how it affects me physically. And it's been really good recognizing it.
I reckon it gives you really significant ways to start to manage anxiety because you learn that's what that was.
Yes. I was starting to feel, because we're getting ready to move back to the States after living overseas 20 years and leaving one of our adult kids here. And the other night I was thinking, oh my gosh, I'm anxious. Whoa. Okay. I know about this. I know this feeling. Let's think about it. And it really helped me to think about what my experiences in the past have been and what I've learned about how I sit with anxiety and what helps me. So
Right. Because I mean, this is totally tying back into our anxiety podcast, but the anxiousness as a feeling isn't bad. But there's ways to notice it and to reduce the intensity, which is what you were talking about.
And I'm wondering how people within our organization have responded to it.
I think it's a lot like you were describing when you've kind of figured out that you were anxious. It's a bit of a revelation of, oh, I have an opportunity to do more in this and to learn. And I think that there's lots of ways to follow up with that too. Thinking about managing emotions, I really like the analogy of window of tolerance.
Yes.
Yeah, Daniel Siegel kind of came up with it. He's written a lot on it. If you Google it, there's tons of great diagrams and pictures out there. But the window of tolerance is our normal way of functioning, engaging with life when our brain and our body is working in the way that it's designed to. We would call that our window of tolerance. And we have lots of good and neutral feelings. We might have content or satisfied, comfortable, grounded, present, flexible, regulated, all of these good emotion words that have us in our kind of normal day-to-day life. Then what happens is when things in our life help us leave the window of tolerance, and what happens is it's triggering our fight, flight, or freeze part of our brain. Normally we work top down when our top part of our brain, or cognition, our prefrontal cortex is engaged. We're thinking, making decisions, and it sits on top of our primal brain, our downstairs fight, flight, or freeze response. What happens is we often, when we leave our window of tolerance, we'll leave to our fight, flight, or freeze. So hyper arousal, which is fight or flight, and that's anxiety, panicked, overwhelmed, hyperactive, angry, jittery, unable to relax, increased heart rate, increased blood pressure. Or we go into the freeze part of our fight, flight, or freeze, and that's hypoarousal, which is exhaustion, numbness, shut down, depressed, shame, poor digestion, disconnected. And what we need to do is have ways to manage getting back into our window of tolerance.
Like that. Like helping people recognize what their window of tolerance is and when they've gotten out of it, and like helping them to develop skills to get them back to that place where they feel like they can function well.
Right. When parents are trying to engage with kids who are out of their window of tolerance, so they're hyper arousal, they're losing it, it's probably edging the parents out of their own window of tolerance.
Right.
And for sure,
Yes.
If nobody's regulated, nobody's going to engage with each other well.
Right.
I think, for teenagers, you add like hormones into the mix and their window of tolerance shrinks to half its normal size.
Oh my gosh. Yes, it does. Yes.
It takes like nothing to get them out.
Right. And I saw this in my own self, and I've seen this in other parents too. Like when you get around that roller coaster with them, there's nobody on the ground. There's nobody on the ground that's going to be there. It's going to be solid whenever they get off the roller coaster. So what would you like for organizations to know? Like sending organizations who send out cross-cultural workers, what would you like for them to know about the importance of emotional intelligence?
I think a lot of it is starting to normalize engaging with it. Super normal for us to say, hey, how's your physical health? Are you
Mhm.
able to lift 50 pounds or whatever minimum thing is? Can you get onto a small airplane and fly to the jungle? Can you walk 10 miles if you have to? That's fairly normal. How's your blood pressure? Do you have any heart issues? That's pretty normal. We might ask spiritual questions. What's your relationship to God like? Do you feel connected and supported? Do you feel disconnected and alone?
Mhm.
We might ask cognitive questions like, do you enjoy learning or studying? Do you want to learn more? Do you want to grow? All super normal. What do we not do?
Talk about emotions.
Talk about emotions as if
Yeah.
there's some like, secret code that we can't do that.
Right. And emotions are such a gift. I mean, there's such a way of tapping into just the beauty of humanity and how we've been made and how we're made to connect. And I think I'm thinking about some of the orientations with our organization. The organization is known for having some pretty rigorous orientation programs, kill a chicken and all that
Yeah,
jazz, and
that's right.
hiking 20 miles uphill.
Swim for a
And,
mile in open water.
right? Thank you. But I just think if you can devote time to helping people understand how they're built, what's going on underneath, I think, well, that would help so much with resilience and relationships.
And I think you're going to have healthier teams
Exactly. Yeah.
because they're going to actually be able to understand themselves and each other, so they can actually listen and hear where each other's coming from. And that's
Right.
actually the next step in emotional intelligence. That next building block is the social awareness. We now understand ourselves. Now we can read the room and understand what people are experiencing.
So you may be able to all swim a mile in open water, but if you can't understand each other, can't understand what's going on with each other, then you're not going to get very far.
I recently wrote a chapter for a new member care book called Trauma Informed Staff Care.
Hmm.
And I think there's a big part of people who have trauma histories, which statistically is a pretty high number of people, whether it was from abuse as a child or difficult things they've encountered in their careers and their work life. Because we tend to react really strongly out of those traumas, what happens if we're not social aware is that we're going to be triggering people and not recognizing that's what's happening.
Exactly right.
So now you have people who are triggering each other all the time, and it's just ramping up kind of the emotional intensity of encounters in a really unhelpful way.
And no one's aware of what's going on. They just
Right.
know that things are getting more intense, but they don't know what's going on underneath
Yeah.
that.
Like, wow, why is that person yelling at me? Not even knowing they're yelling back. That social part, often when we engage people, we're just making up stories in our heads about why people did stuff. They're a jerk, or they're a narcissist, or they hate me, they don't want to work with me, that email's really angry. Well, then you let somebody else read it and they say that seems really normal. Turns out hard to infer emotion in an email or a text message. Our social awareness growing actually helps us be able to have a broader perspective of some of these made up stories. They seem really stressed. I bet they've had a tough day. I see that anger. When I'm angry, I know that that's because I'm actually really hurting, and I can connect
it
with
really
their hurt.
it helps you grow in compassion for people too.
Right.
So yeah, you're saying that growing in emotional awareness takes a lot of work and it can be uncomfortable work, but it's really worth it.
Oh yeah. I just think it's crucially important to have healthy teams. In general, social awareness is the ability to detect and have insights about other people, to connect, to relate, to resolve conflict, the ability to calm distressing emotions in others and understand people's feelings and motives and concerns. That sounds pretty important.
It really does.
I think we want that in our organization.
I think we do.
You think about people that are experiencing compassion fatigue or in really stressful work situations. I've got a buddy who's a police captain, and his people are all burning out like crazy.
Oh, right.
But you think about those intense environments, if there's not a culture around exploring some of those hard emotions, they're just getting bottled up and coming out when people get home and with their spouses. And that's why divorce rate is so high among really stressful jobs.
Right. Because it's like we talked about earlier, there's going to be a cost to ignoring the emotions, but also they're going to come out in some way or another.
Yeah.
So they're going to come out in a way where you're aware of it and you're able to manage it, or it's going to come out like in some other way where you're mad at your wife or you have like ulcers or something like that. So
Yeah. And the poor last person, that the straw that broke the camel's back, or we learned a new Korean one last week, the snowflake that broke the branch,
okay.
is getting all of the intensity of emotion that's been stuffed down, and kind of like, whoa, what did I do?
I really would like for, gosh, everyone that we know, that sounds so dramatic, everyone to know that just, yeah, emotions are a real gift. Even though the ones we've labeled as hard, they're not that bad. They're really good for us to sit with them and look at them. So,
And they're
yeah,
already there. Us not attending to them doesn't
right.
make them not exist.
Exactly.
That's the best part. It's not like they're going somewhere.
Right. They're still there. Nope, they're still there.
If I don't admit
Still
I'm
there.
disappointed, then everything's fine.
Exactly. I'm not angry. No.
Some ways to grow in social awareness. You're going to love the first one is mindfulness.
I love it. Yes. I love it.
We can't
Talk
pick
about
up
that.
on the subtle nonverbal cues when we're just totally in our own head.
Right.
So mindfulness is about being in the moment, sitting with somebody, attending to what's happening, and not just trying to plan our answer to what they're saying.
Yes. Yes. It's just being present with what's going on with them.
Right.
Mhm.
I just was leading a crisis response training to teach people how to be crisis debriefers. And one of the things I shared is, like, when somebody cries, what do you typically do? Like, hand them a tissue a lot of times.
Okay. Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, here, you need this. And it's a subtle nonverbal cue of stop that. Right? Wipe that up.
Mm-hmm.
So in counseling, I always have tissues out. I never offer them.
Okay.
If somebody's starting to look, I can be like, there's some tissues over there. But it is being able to be with people on their whole range of emotional experience.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And the
Now,
messiness too.
yeah, with men. So if I think about the guys I play hockey with, we're probably not sitting around having tears with each other. But somebody's going to share something hard. There was just on Saturday, we were playing in a game, and one of my teammates actually injured somebody pretty significantly. He wasn't trying to hurt anybody, but he was being a little too aggressive, and that's what happened. And he's just devastated. And there's a skill that we can use. It's called acknowledge and reframe. And what we do is we acknowledge an emotion, a feeling, experience, even if it's not right. So like, somebody's really shameful, I'm a terrible person. I'm not going to tell them they're not a terrible person. That's not helpful. That's how they feel. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to acknowledge, wow, it must be really tough for you to sit there with that experience, knowing what happened. That's an acknowledge. And then I'm going to reframe it. I know that you didn't mean that, and that was really hard, but I believe that actually you're going to be able to play better next time. Kind of an acknowledge and reframe. We're going to acknowledge the emotion and then offer a reframe. Empathize, connect.
Yeah. Yeah. And it helps them to move through it so they're not stuck in that experience too, and stuck in that shame. Right.
That empathy is about acknowledging, so their experience, mirroring, so that's where I connect with that emotion within myself, and then co-creating, being able to like be in that space together. The last block is about relationship management. So certainly a part of that is that empathizing and those skills, the acknowledge and reframe and connecting and turning down our own internal world enough so that we can actually sit with somebody. And the relationship management is really using your awareness of your emotions and others to have healthy relationships. It involves clear communication and effective handling of conflicts, and it's the bond you build with others over time.
And as you're talking about this, I'm thinking about living and working cross-culturally is intense. And it really is to our benefit to understand ourselves, to understand our emotions, so that we have the capacity to sit well with other people in our relationships, because our relationships just tend to be more intense when we live overseas.
A lot of pressure, a lot of different cultures coming together. Doing stuff in multiple languages is really tiring, so that we're already kind of probably closer to the edge of our window of tolerance more of the time.
Right. I think it really is so beneficial and such a beautiful gift to give our coworkers whenever we are able to enter into our relationships, understanding ourselves and with an expectancy to want to understand each other too.
I think being a part of like engaging in the conflict and the difficult places is a huge part of relationship management, noticing the time that it takes and being able to give that time to it, because the potential of being closer on the other end of it really matters.
I would say if someone is listening to this episode and they're sort of new to understanding their emotions and understanding themselves, I would encourage you to practice with a safe person that you really trust, and practice having someone you can start processing with. Like, I noticed this about myself, or like asking them what they notice about you also. To start taking those small but really important steps toward, living in that discomfort of starting to recognize what's going on with yourself, and realizing that discomfort's not going to kill you. You can still keep moving. You still keep growing through that too.
I'm meeting with somebody and he has contacted 5 or 6 people in his life to ask them about how he comes across.
That's a really brave thing to do.
It is. It's exactly what I said. Just one more quote to sum it up from George Eliot is one of my favorite about being with people. It goes, "Oh, the comfort, the inexpressible comfort of feeling safe with a person, having neither to weigh thoughts nor measure words, but pouring them out just as if they are chaff and grain together, certain that a faithful hand will take and sift them, keeping what is worth keeping, and with a breath of kindness to blow the rest away." It's that idea of how we sit with people is really significant, and us being aware of our own emotions allows us to do it. I hope that we all can have somebody like that and be that for somebody. Brene Brown says that it's as if we've divided the world into 2 categories, those who give help and those who need it, when in reality, we're both.
Yeah, we are. We are. Just wondering, do you have like all the quotes on your computer screen in front of you, like all the time?
No, I just really remember quotes well.
Okay, because I'm super impressed. Hey, James, do you have any resources you can share with us?
The book Emotional Intelligence is great, but it is a really deep dive. I mean, it's probably a little more than everyone is going to want to get into. Emotionally Healthy Spirituality is really good. For cross-cultural workers, Cross-Cultural Servanthood by Dwayne Elmer is really good. He talks about 4 kind of key components to navigating relationships, especially cross-culturally. Suspending judgment, tolerate ambiguity, thinking gray, so not everything's black and white, right and wrong, and then positive attribution, where the thoughts we make up in our head are intentionally positive, not they're late because they don't care about my time. They're more like, you know what, they operate on a different time relationship schedule than I do.
Right. I'm going to say on your presentation, the children's book about the bunny.
Oh, yeah.
What's that called?
The Rabbit.
Oh, the Rabbit. Really, though, it's really good examples of just being with someone.
It's so good. It's a children's book. Everyone should read it. It's called The Rabbit Listen.
Thanks, James. Thanks for talking about this.
Yeah.
I think it's just really important. And I love looking through your presentation, and I enjoy talking to you about this.
Likewise. Safe travels.
Yeah. Thanks, guys.
Try that again. With the self-awareness piece, my gosh. I think I'm thirsty. It is 90 degrees in here.
I got a cough. Keep that in.
And gross. But like
and gross.
he
and then
had
not to clean it up.